going on, everybody? I'm Jason. This is Tennessee Mountain Homestead, and today is going to be part 3 of tuning in this Mikuni carburetor. Now, what I'm going to do, like I said last episode, is I'm going to put a 17.5 pilot jet in the carburetor, run it, and see how it changes on the spark plugs. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back with the BPR5ES NGK spark plugs. These are the ones that were in the motor before I changed to the 2 heat range, and I cleaned them off, and I'm going to put them back in there. And the reason is that I just saw that other guys have used the 2 range spark plugs in their Predator 670s because they're having the same kind of issues I am. When they do a carb swap, it's running too rich, and they're putting these hot spark plugs in so that it might burn off the deposits and it won't foul plugs. Now, I was doing a little bit of thinking, a little bit of reading and stuff. Now the manufacturer puts an equivalent of a 6 heat range plug in, and that cross-references to a NGK 6ES. Well, this is 1 heat range hotter, this is a 5. I went all the way down to 2, which is the absolute hottest it can get. And it ran fine the other day when I ran them, but I just don't want to risk pre-ignition, detonation, possibly burning a hole in my piston. I don't even know if that's possible, but all that being said, I'm going to go back with the 5s. So give me a minute. I'm going to get the carburetor off this. I'm not going to film that. I did a last video. I'm going to get it on the bench. I'm going to show y'all how to change out a pilot jet on one of these carburetors. Then we're going to take it down the road. All right, so I got a little update. I was taking the carburetor off, and I noticed that there's excessive oil in the mouth of the carburetor, right here, and in my air filter. And I've known about this potential issue for a while. Normally, if I'm hot rodding this thing and I'm making sharp turns and stuff, sometimes it'll get a good inhalation of some oil and it'll blow out the exhaust. It doesn't always do it, but I think what happened is the other day is the first time I've ever run it at higher RPMs for so long, up and down the road and back for a couple miles, and I think that just had a steady amount of oil, enough to accumulate like this. So I just happen to have another air filter because I've been meaning to address this issue. This is not going to be the permanent solution, but it's going to be a solution for today. Now I'm going to put a new air filter on this, and I'm not going to connect the PCV hose back right to the air filter, and it was right in the mouth of the carburetor. As you can see, I put this plastic nipple on there to connect to that hose, and that's probably creating way too much suction and probably pulling oil out of the motor. So what I'm going to do is just put a fuel filter. It's right here. I'm going to put a fuel filter just so that the crankcase can vent for now to atmosphere, and see what happens with that. Alright guys, I got the carburetor up on the bench, and just like before, for taking off the bowl, you just got to loosen up these 4 screws, which I already did off camera, and now just gently pick up the bowl straight up off. The gasket has not come apart yet, and there's this little, I think this is a splash guard, so that this piece of plastic, I think, fits down in there, and the jet sits down in that recess in the bowl, and this goes over top of it. And I think that what this is for is to keep gasoline around the jet so that it can't go dry if you're cornering hard or whatever. Anyway, here's the carburetor once again. There's your main jet, and down in this hole is the pilot jet down in there. So I got to get a smaller screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and change that out. Currently it's a 20, and we're going to put in a 17.5, which I have 2 of. Alright, for removing the pilot jet, you're going to need a small screwdriver, a flathead, and I'm trying to find the slot down in there. There it goes. Okay, so it's completely unthreaded, but I'm gonna have to dump it out. There it goes. So that's a 20. And we're gonna put this right back in the bag that it came in, so I know what it is in the future. It's hard to read those numbers on them stamped on there. But that's a 20, and in goes the 17. Now with anything threaded like this that's fine and delicate, I like to spin it to the left to make sure the threads are engaged. You'll feel it click, and then gently turn it down to the right to tighten it up. Now it just stopped turning. I'm just gonna give it a little bit. Definitely don't want that thing stripping or getting stripped on the flathead. So that's it. Now it has a 17.5 in it. I'm going to put it right back together. Just like that. Put your 4 screws back in. Like I said, make sure to turn them to the left and then to the right so that I know that the threads engage. You'll feel it ride on the threads and it'll click. And I always tighten them down in a cross pattern. And I don't tighten any one at first. It's kind of like anything when you're torquing something down that has a gasket surface or multiple bolts. You don't want to crank any one of them all the way down first, because then it'll be uneven and cause issues. So what I've done is I start on one and then just go in a cross pattern until they're all very similar. And these don't need, I don't know what the torque spec on these is. I have not looked it up, but it's a Phillips head screw, guys. So it doesn't need to be wrench tight, just enough where you feel it's not going to back out on its own. There's no pressure inside there either, really. Just needs to not fall apart. And that's it. We're going to put this back on the tractor, take it for a spin. Alright guys, carburetor's back on. As you can see, I put the fuel filter. This is a temporary fix. I don't know what I'm going to do long term, but I went with the air cleaner that I just took off of it because I'm going to experiment. So I put the fuel filter to the PCV hose, and then I've got another hose coming off of it, as you can see. And what I'm going to do, I drilled a little hole in the front of the air cleaner, and I put that little brass fitting on there, and I'm going to loop this hose around and just put it over that fitting. Because that way it's not just vented, that way there'll be some suction, and I know it's going to be less suction because the air is going to be going in this filter media and into the carburetor. How it was before is this hose was directly connected right into the mouth of the carburetor, so it had a lot of vacuum, I think. If I put it out here, first of all, it's a smaller hose. This is only a 5/16, and then it's on the end of the air filter, so there will be some suction. It'll give the crankcase a vacuum, you know, on some level, and I think it'll drastically reduce the amount of oil that's going to be going back in the motor. So I'm going to get this connected, and we're going to take this thing for a spin next. Everything's all set up, ready to go. I just changed out the spark plugs. Now these were the brand new ones I put in the last video, the 2 ESs, as I was saying earlier. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with spark plugs and the heat ranges, it's not a hotter, more intense spark. That's not what you're getting. It's that there's more insulation between the tip of the spark plug and the cylinder head, so that the spark plug itself gets hot and stays hot. Now my fear is that it'll get too hot at some point and then cause detonation and damage my motor. So I put the 5 ESs back in. They're clean, they're tight, and here's my setup, my temporary setup, temporary permanent, for the PCV crankcase ventilation. It goes right to the front of the air filter. Everything's tight, my choke's in, my gas line's hooked up. Next thing we're gonna do, turn on the fuel pump. We're gonna start priming this thing, let the fuel bowl fill up with gas. I'm gonna give it some choke. I don't know if it needs it or not, but we're gonna do it. Make sure it's in neutral, and I'm gonna fire it up. Just let it warm up for a minute. I gotta put some gas in her. She's a thirsty girl. Alright, so here we are at the spring. I shut the motor off because today I have a chase vehicle. I'm not saying anything. This thing has never not started on me. But there's always that first time, right? The time I go a mile or two from the house and then turn it off and won't start back up. Anyway, we're at the spring. It's exactly 1 mile from my house. I think that's plenty far enough to read the plugs. I gotta say, the throttle response feels better. While we're here, let me show you guys a quick thing. There's a spring here that comes out from the rock formation up there. And my neighbors, my closest neighbors, have lived here for a very long time. I'm not sure how many years, but several decades. And he's telling me that he's been getting water from this spring the whole entire time. It's perfectly drinkable. Come check it out. So somebody brought that tube down from up there. They've got like a concrete box up there that somebody fabricated, and that thing catches the water from the spring. That box fills up with water, and then this tube just brings it down here for people to pull up here and fill up their jugs. Pretty cool. So anyways, we're gonna get this thing fired back up, head back to the garage, check the plugs. See you in a minute. So we were just cruising along and this thing shut down on me. I was immediately thinking like, what's going on? And then I realized fuel pump wasn't on. Let's get back to the garage. just got back. Before I turn that thing off, it's over there running. I think the throttle response is greatly improved with that pilot jet. Let's go check it out. I literally just pulled this thing in here not even a minute ago, and I'm pulling the spark plugs out while they're still hot, while everything's just been run. Not sure if still hot makes a difference, but sounds good. This is the rear one. This is the one that is usually cleaner than of the two. And this motor's not extremely hot, guys. Like, sure, I got gloves on, but they're thin gloves. But I can put my hands on the cylinder, on the valve covers, on the engine shroud, on the metal that guides the air around the cylinder heads. It's not scalding hot. I could probably put my bare hand on this thing. Yeah, see, I can hold my hand on the valve cover. And that's after 2 miles of driving at probably rated RPM. Anyway, here's the first plug. And it wasn't perfect when I put it in there. I had just used a wire brush to clean off the black. It's still a touch black. I think it was cleaner than that when I put it in. So it still needs to be leaned out a little bit, I think. Let's check the front one. I'm thinking my next move is to adjust the carburetor slide, the needle, up one position, or which way it makes it leaner. I think that's my next move instead of changing the main jet again, because I don't have another one yet. If I need to go down to the next one, like I think it might be a 210, I'll get that, but that's a couple weeks out if I order it. And here's the front one. Definitely sooty, but not like caked on, it's just black. See, I can just wipe it right off with my fingertip. And the throttle response was not crazy. It seemed better when I was driving it. If it's at all over a slow idle, it revs right up. But if it's idling down low and I juice it, it still stumbles. It just falls on its face. But these spark plugs aren't even hot. Look, it's a rare sight. Taking off my costume gloves. These spark plugs just came out of that motor. Yeah, they're hot, but I'm putting them in my bare hands. They're not that hot. So that brings me to another question, is will this motor ever be at operating temperature if I'm not continuously running it at 3,600 RPMs, which is what it was made to do. You know, it was made to be a pressure washer, or not a generator, but I don't know. I don't think it's meant to be throttled up and down. I think it's meant to run at 3,600, and that's it. And what I'm doing with this thing is, basically I idle this thing around 90% of the time. I rarely do that, which I'm probably gonna be doing that a lot more than I ever did now that it's running better and not so rich. And something else, I went through that whole debacle 6-7 months ago when I first turned this thing on and started driving it, and when the whole thing with the muffler catching fire, the packing in it, that could have very well just been the excess fuel vapor. I thought that could have been an issue. I guess I just didn't want to believe it. So I might be getting another muffler off eBay identical to that one that has the packing in it again, because I took all this packing out thinking it was going on fire. And I might try it. Maybe it'll take down the edge off of the exhaust note, because it sounded good with the packing in it. Now it's a little pingier. It doesn't have the absorption. But I'm putting the plugs back in because that's all I'm going to do for tonight. It's getting dark outside, as you saw when we were up and down the road there. It's getting dark. I don't want to take this thing back out again. I went to work today. It's a 150-mile round trip, and this thing's been on my mind though. I'm excited to get it running properly. And I did take a hiatus off of this thing. I just kind of got burned out on working on it. We've been doing the wheel horse instead. But after work seemed like a good time to toy with this thing and tinker with it. And so far, I'm happy with the results. Now, as far as that 17.5 goes, I don't know if it made a difference or not. It feels the exact same as it did yesterday. So maybe that pilot circuit's not as important as I thought. Maybe the main jet plays more of a role in this thing than I thought or I've read. Because main jet, I think, is like anywhere between 25 or, don't quote me, I'm not even gonna pretend like I know. But the main jet is like for mid and full throttle from what I've read. Now it seems to make a lot more difference than that, because I'm definitely not running this thing full throttle. When I'm out there cruising, I'm just barely on that throttle pedal. It's all it takes, and if I give it any more than a little bit of throttle, it's gonna be running way too many RPMs and more than it can handle. So let me get this tightened up, and we'll say our final thoughts in a minute. One more thing I'd like to mention, since we did it in this video, is that I ran up and down the road 2 miles with this new setup with the PCV, and there's no oil in that filter. So I think that's good. I don't think it needs an incredible amount of suction on it. I'm gonna do something similar and put the new filter on there. I might even I have a 90-degree fitting, silicone fitting I got a few months back. I might put the air filter more up towards the front, or try to get it up in the grill so it takes cooler air, not the air that's in here, because when this thing's idling around the yard a lot or on trails or something, all that heat's just in here under the hood and it's drawing all that hot air. I think if I move the filter down in the grill, it might be better. I don't know, we'll see. Anyways guys, once again, thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, please like, comment, subscribe. I very much appreciate that. I try to answer all the comments I get. And I think that's gonna be it. Once again, my name's Jason. This is Tennessee Mountain Homestead, and we'll see you on the next one.